started. So what is .NET? I mean, it's a weird word, right? You know, it starts with a period, NET. You know, it's not something that, you know, easy to remember like, you know, Java or, you know, it starts with a period. It actually makes saving some file names and stuff interesting sometimes. But really, you know, first and foremost, .NET is a framework. I mean, I don't know if there's any Java developers here in the audience tonight, but you know, .NET is a framework, just like, you know, the JRE in Java is the development framework. And I swear this is the only long quote on the slide tonight, but you know, I think it gives a good, you know, good explanation of what a software framework it is and what it seeks to solve. But in computer programming, a software framework is an abstraction in which software providing generic functionality can be selectively changed by user code, thus providing application-specific software. It is a collection of software libraries providing a defined application programming interface, or API. So .NET, being a framework, you know, has in it everything that you would expect of a development framework. You know, this is an exhaustive list. I mean, you could do a whole series of talks on everything you can do with .NET, but I think it kind of, you know, exemplifies at least what I saw in my mind is, you know, some things that you just expect from a development framework. You know, your different user interface components, you know, as both web and desktop components. So, you know, everything, you know, text boxes and check boxes and buttons and tabs and forms and dialogues and, you know, all that stuff. Everything that you would expect, you know, as a UI component .NET has. File I/O, you know, so reading files and writing files and deleting files and managing directories and all those sorts of things you can do with .NET. Communications, you know, so you know, talking with other systems, you know, over TCP/IP or UDP, HTTP, FTP, HTTPS, you know, whatever you're going to use, you can do that in .NET. Security, you know, cryptography libraries, authentication, authorization, you can all do in .NET. Multi-threading, you know, so threads and thread pools and, you know, mutexes and semaphores and reader-writer locks and those sorts of things you can do in .NET. Data access, I mean, you know, occasionally you write a program that doesn't need to talk to a database in the real world. It doesn't happen very often that you write a program like that. So, you know, you can access data in .NET using the ADO.NET library. Regular expressions, strings and string manipulation, XML and DOM support, timers, datetime functions, math functions, you know, and a whole lot of other stuff. You know, everything that you would expect from a development framework .NET has. But you know, .NET is more than a framework. I mean, if you say Alan, what is he? He's a human being, right? I mean, if you ask what .NET is, it's a framework. But I mean, it's really more than a framework. You know, if you talk to somebody that works, you know, on a .NET team in a .NET environment, you know, there's certain ways, you know, that they go about, you know, building their applications, and there's certain ways that they, you know, certain tools that they use in their day-to-day. So I think it's kind of important to kind of, when you talk about what is .NET, get an idea of, you know, what it's like to work in .NET, you know, on a .NET project. And, you know, first and foremost, you know, I have a developer bias, you know, but, you know, first and foremost, to me, it's Visual Studio, your integrated development environment, or IDE. And it's a tool in which you'll build your applications. You know, you write your code, you test your code, you know, your files and your builds, your debugging and all those sorts of things, you know, unit testing, whatever you do in Visual Studio. And then Team Foundation Server, or TFS, is Microsoft's application lifecycle management suite. You know, so it has everything you need in it, you know, for managing your team and your code. You know, it has source code management and task tracking, integration to SharePoint, you know, build management, and you can customize it. You can customize the workflows. That's how the tasks move to the system and everything. And you know, so everything you need in it to manage your team and manage your code, and manage your releases too, actually. Windows Server, you know, which is the operating system in which you'll usually deploy your applications, and release your services and such. SQL Server is usually your database. You know, in a .NET environment, usually you use SQL Server. It has all the other fun things in it that a normal database has, columns and, you know, tables and triggers and stored procedures and all those sorts of things, you know, SQL Server. Internet Information Services, or IIS. Again, those of you that have Java experience, IIS is your web deployment environment, your web host. You know, so in a Java world, this would be Apache with Tomcat, or JBoss, or WebSphere. You know, it's just where you deploy your websites and your web applications and your web services. You know, so they can surface value to your users. Windows Azure is kind of a new addition to the .NET environment. It's Microsoft's cloud development solution, and there's been a lot of growth in cloud development in the last couple of years. Still, I would say probably most .NET teams don't really deal with Azure. But if you're on a .NET team that does have a cloud element to what you're building, you might use Windows Azure. I mean, you might use Amazon too, but Microsoft really makes it easy to use Azure that way. And of course, the desktop, you know, Windows XP, Vista, Windows 8. Hopefully, there's no Windows 98 out there anywhere. You know, where your clients will take the desktop applications you write for them and run them day in and day out. You know, day in and day out. And so line of business applications like imaging applications, human workflow, point of sale applications are all good examples of you know programs that run on the desktop in a .NET environment. And of course, web browsers. You know, if you're developing a website or a web application or web service, you know, your clients, you know, your users have to use a web browser to get to your application. And I guess one thing that's important to note about web browsers, I know it was about a year ago that IE finally fell below 50% usage. I mean, they still, I think, have more than anybody else, but odds are nowadays, you know, even in a .NET environment, and you build a .NET product, that odds are, you know, people accessing your web application will be doing so from a non-Microsoft browser, you know, so Chrome or Firefox, Opera, or Safari. So, you know, again, even though we're talking about a .NET environment, it doesn't necessarily mean it's all Microsoft. And like I said before, it's not that in a .NET environment that you'll necessarily use all Microsoft products. I mean, they make it easy to. It's just like it's easy to use all Oracle products, easy to use all SAP products, easy to use all IBM products. They do that for a reason. They want you to buy all their stuff. But you know, but typically in most teams I've worked on, you know, this is typically the way you would work. You know, with these products in a .NET environment. But .NET, you hear it referred to a lot as .NET technology. You know, .NET technology is a fancy word for either I built it using .NET or it's built for building things in .NET. You know, so you hear the term .NET technology a lot. But really, at least in my mind, what I see as the core of .NET technology, what it means in terms of what is .NET, is that you know you can build your solution soup to nuts, end to end, you know, in .NET. You know, you don't have to necessarily transition to another technology in the middle layer somewhere. And like I said on the slide here, I have an example architecture for an Intune architecture. And you know, it's not like the end all or be all, but it's just an example architecture where you'd have a web user interface and a desktop user interface that kind of share a common service layer, so you don't have to write it twice, right? And then the service layer delegates to a business layer that delegates to a data access layer. I mean, there's, you could put 100 different architectures up here that would demonstrate how, you can implement your entire solution from top to bottom in .NET. And so I think that's really the important takeaway of .NET technology. You can build your whole system in .NET. And I mean, there's tools out there to help you with it. Either you build your solution in .NET, and there's plenty of other people that build libraries and utilities and helpers to help you build things in .NET. I mean, just like any other platform. And what I really think, and there's probably some that agree and some that don't, that really the heart of .NET and what makes it so interesting and so powerful is the concept of the common language specification. And there's kind of two big pieces to the common language specification. The first, at the top, is that you actually have a choice of languages in .NET. It's not like Java where you write Java in Java and you write Ruby in Ruby and you write C++ in C++. In .NET you actually have a choice of development languages. If you have more of a C or C++ or Java background, C# would kind of be your choice. C# is a very C++, Java-style syntax. But if you grew up more with BASIC and GW Basic, or VBA and VB6, there's VB.NET. It's a very Visual Basic-like syntax. So that's kind of a powerful thing that, you know, no matter which background that you come from, and there's other backgrounds too, but, you know, at least in those two backgrounds, you actually have a choice. You can develop in the language that you're more comfortable with. And that's powerful. The common language specification allows that. So it makes that possible. One thing I would mention, just as a note, that in the industry,